Welcome back to the center of it all. This week, Mel's recipe is perfect for the 4th of July, but this one is more about the story than the ingredients.
As I always say, every recipe has a story or a history, and in the case of bean soup, it has both a story and a history with our United States Senate. Back on a hot day in 1904, the Speaker of the House walked into the Senate dining room and was outraged when he found out they had removed bean soup from the menu for the summer. "Thunderation!" he roared. "I want bean soup on the menu every day." In 1907, the Senate Rules Committee unanimously passed a resolution declaring, as long as the Senate is in session, no day shall pass without bean soup. 1 century later, it hasn't changed. Join me today while I show you how to make our country's famous Senate bean soup recipe. The best way to describe a ham shank or a ham hock is, it's a mini ham. The hock is taken from right above the hoof, and the shank is taken from right above the hock, which makes the shank a little meatier. I prefer the shank, and that's lucky for me because they're available all over Happy Valley. So we're using a shank in our soup today, but there's only one thing you need to know. Neither are meaty and both are smoked, so they are usually only added to dishes for flavor rather than substance. In terms of the beans, the Senate's recipe is pretty straightforward. They call for a 1-pound bag of dried navy beans to be soaked in a bowl full of water for 24 full hours. I've obviously done that. And after you've drained them, they've swelled to twice their size, and we have 5 cups of softened beans ready to be cooked into our soup. In terms of veggies, they're pretty straightforward too, except it's the way you prep them that's important. Everything from the potatoes to the parsley needs to be small diced or minced. Now that we've got our shanks and our beans and our veggies, let's head over to the stovetop and make some soup. When it comes to running 7 busy dining rooms, it should go without saying that Senate bean soup has to taste good, but it also has to be really easy to make too. And when it comes to this soup recipe, it's all about properly prepping the ingredients, putting them all together in a pot, and giving them all the time they need to cook low and slow. I've got a 6-quart pot, and I have 2 quarts of liquid in here. I used 1 quart of the water I reserved from soaking my beans and 1 quart of water. I'm going to put that on high heat, and I'm going to add my ham shank, which is about 1.25 pounds. I've got my beans, all 5 cups. We've got 1.5 cups of diced celery. A 1.5 cups of diced onion, again small dices, and 3 cloves of minced garlic. 3 cups of small diced potatoes. I'm using gold potatoes. I like their creamy texture when they finish cooking. I've got a 1/2 cup of parsley, 3 bay leaves, 2 teaspoons of salt, and a teaspoon of coarse black pepper. Lastly, I'm adding carrots, a 1.5 cups. It's not on the original Senate bean soup recipe, but in the neck of the woods I come from, bean soup without carrots isn't bean soup. Give this a stir. And when this comes to a boil, I'm going to adjust it to a simmer. I'm going to cover the pot, and I'm going to let it go for 2.5 to 3 hours. It's just going to cook itself. My soup simmered for 2.5 hours, and then it sat for 2.5 hours. We call it steeping, and that's to let all of those great flavors come together and cool off a little bit. Now I'm going to take my ham shank out. It's perfectly cooked. And this is, it's kind of messy, but we're just going to pull the meat from the bones. And there's usually 2 bones in the shank. I'm going to start pulling it apart. Well, first I'm going to look for pieces of fat off the sides. I'm going to pull that loose. Although most of the fat has already cooked off it and into the soup. There's a big piece. Breaking it up as best I can. Here. I kind of just mash it. Told you this was messy, but it's kind of fun. Then I just start cutting through it with a knife to pull it into really small little shards and pieces. And I want this pulled and cut as fine as I can get it. We're going to have, as you're going to see, there's about 2 cups of meat here. That's all you're going to typically get off of a shank, and you'll get a little less than that if you're using a hock. That looks pretty good. Goes really fast. Scrape this all back up. I'm going to put this back into the soup. I'll give this a good stir. I'll probably put it back on the stove for about 5 minutes just to get this soup all heated through, and then we're going to eat. When I was 12, I actually ate Senate bean soup in the Senate dining room. And you can too, but you just can't walk in from the street. You have to write a letter to your state's senator requesting passes. And the ones we received allowed access to the tunnel that actually joins the Senate to the Senate dining room, which allowed us to peek into a lot of offices and meeting rooms along the way. Oh, just like I remember. For these and all of my recipes, just go to my website.
I love ham and bean soup, so the addition of carrots is something I'm definitely going to be doing. When we come back, we leave the soup on the stove and head out to the golf course with Matt Vukovich.